name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. All right, everyone, welcome back to Nets in the Water. I'm your host, John Barreto. Nets in the Water is trying to stoke the flame of Catholic educations. It's a podcast with educators for educators. Today, we have a great educator on, a good friend of mine, great influence, Noah Menendez. Noah, thank you so much for coming on today.
I am really stoked to be here.
It's going to be a good time.
I've always wanted to be on a podcast.
Yeah, I've never had a guest be so excited to put on the headphones. You're really locked in today.
I can't move the mic, which is frustrating. But
it's part of the
right
experience.
Is
like really getting the mic wherever you want it. Gets real far out, real back close. It's nice.
No, I can't do it.
Okay. Well, I'll be praying for your hardship. I'm really sorry about that. So Noah you are the assistant principal currently at Christ the King. We had Christ the King's principal, Nick Tanis, on an earlier episode. If you guys haven't seen that one, go ahead and watch it. It's a sick interview. But today we have Noah on here. You've been assistant principal at Christ the King for...
It's my second year.
It's only your second year?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was about to say like 6.
Yeah.
I'm super wrong. Okay. Yeah. Second year. Tell me more.
Before that, 5 years at Jesuit as an English teacher and lacrosse coach, and anything student activities that I can get my hands on, student trips, retreats, and the like. And now I'm actually back at Jesuit as the head lacrosse coach. So assistant principal at Christ the King, which is K-8, for those who do not know that. And then back at Jesuit, which is high school for lacrosse right now.
Jesuit High School, Tampa. There it is. Are you you're like the varsity lacrosse coach?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you play lacrosse in college?
Yeah, I played at the University of Tampa.
Oh, really? Okay. So you were good at lacrosse.
I was good enough to play college.
Okay. Are you still good at lacrosse, or are you kind of washed?
That answer was given to us a couple weeks ago when I went back for my alumni game. And I had a lot of fun. I won't say that I played that well, but it was
what does not playing well look like, though? I mean, I feel like you were still probably nasty. You were just...
Not playing well looks like shot speed is significantly slower. I think I got... I was able to dodge and take a shot on goal, and it was probably the most easy ball to save that the goalie had ever seen in his life.
How fast is that terrible shot? I thought you were still going to tell me it's like
60 miles an hour. I don't know.
Okay. Well, what were you
A good shot is like 85, 90 miles an hour, probably.
Lacrosse is such a ludicrous sport to me. The fact that any human chooses to play it makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
All love to anyone watching who plays lacrosse, but it just makes no sense.
Did you know that lacrosse is not founded, but it was discovered by a Jesuit priest, a French Jesuit priest.
Really?
So one of the Jesuit martyrs of Canada.
Okay.
French.
I've been to La Crosse, Wisconsin. That's got to be something close.
Saint John de Brebeuf.
Oh, it was John de Brebeuf?
Yeah, he wrote about it in his diary in the 1600s. He saw a stick and ball game.
Okay.
So he was the first one to kind of witness the Iroquois Six Nation Indians playing it.
That's a fun little tidbit to open up the podcast.
Yeah, isn't that awesome?
Well, so Noah, you worked at Jesuit. You currently work at Christ the King. What was your path initially? I don't really know anything about you since you became an educator at Jesuit High School. Yeah. Were you even raised Catholic? How did that look like? Like, what was that whole story like?
Yeah, I have a really, I think, cool conversion story. I don't even know if I would say conversion because, I was baptized Catholic. My brother and my brother's 2 years older than I am. I was baptized Catholic and raised Christian, but not like Sunday Mass going. And I really went to public school and then a charter school for middle school. And my parents sent my brother and I to Jesuit. And that was like my first real experience in the Catholic faith. And that was really unique because at that point you have a lot of kids who go to K-8 Catholic schools who are at their stage of burnout, right? Mm-hmm. And I was the opposite. I got to Jesuit and I'm just like, what is all this?
Yeah.
And it pulled me in immediately. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I didn't know what it meant.
Your first year was in 83, 84?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, 2000. This will age me the opposite way. 2010 was the fall of my freshman year.
Okay. But you got there, and it was like your first experience being immersed in Catholic culture.
Yeah.
Already a beautiful symbol of Catholic education that I'm sure we'll get to later in the podcast.
100%, yeah.
But so you started off, you're super stoked. Then where did it take you?
Yeah, so I met this man named Brian Greenfield, who would also be great for this podcast. And he was, right now he's the Dean of Discipline at Jesuit, but he's had multiple hats. When I was a Jesuit, he started my sophomore year as the campus minister. Jimmy Mitchell's role now. And, he was really the first one to start to revolutionize campus ministry at Jesuit before Father Huff, and then Jimmy took over. But he was the first person who, like, caught fire, and I was like, whatever this pure ministry thing is, I want to be a part of it. And so I really got attached to faith at Jesuit, among other things. And then when I went to the University of Tampa, I wouldn't say I stopped being a Catholic. I think it was more so I hit that natural progression that many Catholics hit when they go to college, if it's not to a Catholic university, is the outside world, right?
Yeah. Big influence.
The secular world, right? You get into the secular world.
What did you initially go to college for?
I was in a history major.
Gotcha.
So I was a history major, and because I loved history, I really, going to college, my goal was to play lacrosse and do something I enjoyed, right? Study something I enjoyed. And with the kind of ethereal goal of, like, going to law school one day. So, like, history fit into that, because I was like, okay, writing and research, you learn those skills in history. I like history. It's one of my favorite classes at Jesuit. And, my senior year, I had this man named Austin Freeman as a teacher as well. And he inspired him, and Dr. Marachi, my junior English teacher at Jesuit, both inspired a deeper love for English. So I decided to take English classes as a minor. And then by the time I was a sophomore, I had multiple English professors hand me a change of major form. And, they kind of fight over students because they're kind of the minority degrees on campus: English, history, the humanities.
Yeah.
So I actually decided to switch, though, because I really, really enjoyed it. I had a big connection to that, and I kept my history degree. I just made it my minor. I kind of switched them, English, with still the plan to go to law school.
Now, were either of those passions for history or English rooted in your faith, or was it more of just a kind of topical fascination with the two?
I wouldn't say it was directly rooted in my faith.
Okay.
But I think looking back on it, it definitely played a role.
Yeah. Oh, because, I mean, it's always
the
there.
Humanities, philosophies, they all play into theology.
Yeah.
And, the art of being, people who are what inspires us to write poetry, to write novels.
Yeah, it's no secret.
Is the human condition.
Totally.
And what is the thing that delves deepest into the human condition is the Catholic faith, right?
100%.
So I really, at that point, I think there was a moment when I was in high school. I was a sophomore, and I was sitting in history class, and I had Mr. Kaiser. And I remember sitting back there and being like, I could have a lot of fun doing this. My mom's a teacher. There's some educators in my family, so it was kind of in the bloodline. But, there's still the stigma to being a teacher, right? It sucks, but there's the stigma to being a teacher. And so what are you drawn to? You're drawn to the worldly, right? So it's like, as a lawyer, I'm going to make money. I'm going to, be like on the TV shows, be in the courtroom.
There's like a level of prestige to it. There's like,
not that there aren't plenty of lawyers out there who are fantastic Catholics, but it's like, it wasn't rooted in faith. It was more like, it was more status, right? Even when I was in college, what are you going to do with an English major? And I was just like, what are you going to do? Teach? And I was like, maybe.
Was that an insult? Like, yeah, maybe I will.
But my junior year of college, I started seriously looking for jobs or like a career path, because the first 2 years was like, I'm going to have fun. I'm going to do best I can in school, and I'm going to do the best I can on the lacrosse field. That's all that mattered to me. I wasn't super worried about internships, doing any of that. Like, I focused on doing well. And then I hit my junior year, the end of my junior year, and I was just like, I need to start really looking into some things. And I just so happened to see Father Hermes at a lacrosse game. I tried to go back to a Jesuit lacrosse game every season just to see my old coaches, and somehow I always went to the one that Father Hermes was at, by the way. And he was there, and he's like, hey, Noah, how's it going? And I was like, it's going great. And he's like, how's college going? We started talking about what I wanted to do. And he's like, wow, so do you think you'd want to be a teacher? And I was like, this is a funny story. I was like, yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to teach here. That'd be awesome. And he goes, whoa, pump your brakes. I wasn't saying here. I was saying teaching in general. And so I was just like, yeah, I think that could be a career for me. And he's like, well, why don't you reach out to Miss Pacheco, who's the assistant principal at Jesuit, and she'll let you know what steps you might need to take, because I wasn't an education major, so I wasn't just going to come out with my degree in education and get hired right away somewhere outside of like a private school at Jesuit, where it wasn't a requirement at the onset. I ended up getting my teaching certificate later as I was a teacher, but I didn't need it to get hired. So I met with her, and she actually asked me. She was like, "You would be great here," and I was like, "I know, I'd love that. That'd be the dream," but I wasn't expecting anything, and it just kind of by my senior year.
I mean, at this point, you're a 21-year-old.
Yeah.
Fresh out of college.
Oh, I'm not out of college yet. So senior year.
Oh, wow. Still in college.
Yeah. So that was like in between my juniors year of college. Sorry,
okay.
I'm droning on, but what was I going to say? Oh, so in my senior year of college, basically, I was trying to decide what I wanted to do. And I had this really interesting opportunity to go play lacrosse in Australia. Play for like a semi-professional team and like work like a construction job and just like make a bunch of money and just, play lacrosse and explore Australia and New Zealand and all those areas. And right when I was about to accept that kind of position to go do that for like 6 months, Mrs. Pacheco reached out to me directly and was like, "There's an English job open at Jesuit if you want to apply." So I applied, interviewed, and by I think March of my senior year of college, I signed my contract.
Wow!
So that's what's led me into education. So yeah, long story short, so I got into education.
Yeah, a lot of providence there, a lot going on. Are there any seeds that you see that were like planted through high school and college that like now in hindsight you're just like, yeah, totally, that was absolutely like to push me in the area of education?
Well, I think the one of them I already said, which was when I was sitting in history class my sophomore year. I remember it vividly and thinking, wow, I think I could do something like this. But I think also the first time I ever stepped foot onto Jesuit's campus, maybe the second time, was when my brother, who's like I said was 2 years older than me, we went on his open house tour. And I remember just like walking through the hallways, Building 3, and just being like, there's something special about this place. I couldn't put my finger on it. I had no idea what it was. I just felt called to it. And I think that was probably the first ever little seed God probably planted of like attraction, right? And then just, I think the immense change that the relationships, and I think this is a bigger thing I'd want to touch on later in the podcast if we have time.
Please, yeah.
The immense impact of the relationships that were formed by educators on my life was huge, right? When you look back, like every Jesuit graduate's like, yeah, it'd be so fun to teach at Jesuit one day, but it's more so because they just want to return to Jesuit and that has their place in their heart. But like, for me, it was like, there are some really tangible changes that happened in my life because of relationships with teachers and positive role models. And like, I want to do that. That's fun. There's no dollar amount that you could put on that when it comes to getting paid or, being wealthy. It's like, there's no dollar amount on that. There's no dollar amount on being able to go on a trip to Europe with a bunch of rascally, with 100 rascals.
Yeah.
You can't put a price tag on that. And that's, I think, really what drew me into being a teacher. And then into being an administrator, I think it was just like, what's next?
Because you're talking about how great this high school education was and the relationship and the connections. And you're now an administrator at a elementary and middle school.
Yep.
How is that? Yeah. How did that transition happen?
Yeah, I think, I started looking into, okay, what is so great about being a teacher here at Jesuit? And one of the things was like having amazing administrators. So I was like, is that something I can do? And one time, Mr. Barry Newberger, the previous principal at Jesuit, I remember when I first started teaching, he was always like, Noah, go get that master's degree. And I was just like, okay, you can do this one day. Like, he told me that. looking back on that and talking about seeds, that might have been a seed too.
Yeah.
You know, because you're just like, nobody just comes up to you and says that. Like, you know. So I decided, you know, if I'm going to get my master's degree, what am I going to do it in? Is it going to be in English? I'd have a lot of fun doing that. Or is it going to be in education? And, you know, so I decided to go in education to prep myself for when that time came, because I had a feeling that I would get into administration and take that next step at some point in my career.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how fast it would be. Because basically right after getting my master's in education is when the call came to, you know, move over to Christ the King, you know, and that position.
Did you start to get the master's and then choose to go to Christ the King, or was there like, oh, this position at Christ the King, so let me get my master's?
It was basically like the same.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Like I had started getting my master's already, but like
it was right.
They coincided. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a common theme. The providence is such a common theme of every educator that's been on here. Is like very few of them have been like, oh yeah, I graduated college. I knew I wanted to be in Catholic education. It was just like, yeah, the way the Lord sows the seeds to lead you there to now be an administrator. That I'm really curious how those things that initially drew you to Catholic education, this like a relationship, the influence, the direct time with students, the trips. I mean, at least as an outsider, it would seem like you lose a lot of that as an administrator. Yeah. So how did you still get that? Or did you just kind of, were you willing to give it up for the greater good of it?
Oh, that's been one of my struggles. I mean, assistant principal of student affairs is my job title. And so there is some of that, right? Like we have a club called the Sean Devereaux Club. It's a service club. We have school retreats. You know, they're not as you know, overnighty or you know, lengthy as you would see in a high school or a college. But we had still have retreats. We have I run this group. Me and Flavio. He's the campus minister or the youth minister over at Christ the King.
Stellar guy.
Yeah,
love Flavio.
Donuts and discipleship with the 7th and 8th graders. So we have like a little discipleship group. So you get little pieces of that. But that was one of the struggles getting into it. Is like, yeah, like my job now is mostly I handle a lot of student affairs, but it's discipline. You know, it's dress code. It's those things, it's been an uphill battle because I never, as a teacher, you know, you never.
Yeah, you're someone who cares a lot about dress code too. I can tell in high school you probably were real buttoned up.
So, you know, it's just that has been the thing that's been the big growing point for me, because it's like, okay, now how do you help form the youth? It's not the same way. You're still doing it. It's just in a different way. You're doing it by holding them accountable so that they know that there are consequences for their actions, right? Which it's a harder way to form kids, but it's necessary, right?
Yeah.
And there's a holiness in that, I feel, you know, it's not easy.
Do you think that hinders your ability to build relationship with the students at all?
I think you just have to build it in different ways. I mean, and you know, this might be getting into a natural segue into what we kind of want to talk about in the podcast, which is like religious philosophy on education. But like, you know, St. John Bosco, you know, the Salesian spirituality that is at Christ the King, and you'll see it in Ignatian spirituality and philosophy too, is, you know, St. John Bosco took boys off the side of the street during the Industrial Revolution who all they did was cause trouble and focus that energy into good.
Yeah.
Right. So like,
yeah, he's like the OG disciplinarian.
Yeah,
not OG, but he's like a model for it.
But he does it. Yeah, he does it. I mean, he has
get these kids out of trouble.
You know, he has his way of doing things. Right. It's the preventative method. Right. It's you prevent students and from misbehavior by forming deep relationships with them, right? So it's just like you do need to hold kids accountable for their actions, but at the same time, it's like I always, as a coach, I always think about it this way: the best coaches I ever had were the ones I did not want to disappoint. And if you think about it, like, why don't I want to disappoint this coach? You know, and when you look deeper into it, it's like I don't want to disappoint him because I know that he cares for me. I know that he cares for my being, for me to be better, right? Not just to win this game, not just to score this goal, right? I care for him as a human being because he cares for me. And I think that's the base of like St. John Bosco, at least. His preventative method is like form the relationship first. And then comes afterwards the accountability. And they understand that more, right? When they know that you care for them, it's different, right? Than just
Yeah, it's not
some
the same
arbitrary,
vibe. It's just,
you
the
know.
assistant principal told me to tuck my shirt in.
Yeah. And some kids, that's what it will be, right? Because you have to put in the work to form that relationship with them. But I think that's where like the spirituality comes into education and why it's so important with regards to forming the whole person and approaching educating a student by looking at the direction of their soul, right? Because
what does that mean, the direction of their soul?
Are they going to heaven? Are you helping them go to heaven, right?
Got it.
That's what I think. When I think of Ignatius, that's what I think, right?
Uh-huh.
And there's this quote I used to open up my English classes with when I was teaching at Jesuit from C.S. Lewis. It goes something along the lines of, education without values, it seems, is a better tool for turning man into a devil, or helping man turn into devilish ways, right? So like without education, or education that's not guided by some sort of morality or philosophy, values such as religion, such as Catholicism, it has no motive to teach for the good, right?
Yeah.
You're basically just teaching someone like how to be that's what it is, be a more clever devil, right? So it's just like you're enlightening them, but are you enlightening them to go out and do good in the world? Or like St. Ignatius says, set the world aflame, right?
Totally.
So that was really cool.
It makes a lot of sense to me, practically speaking, how you would do that in the classroom. And I understand the principles that you're saying of like an administrator, you build a relationship, you care for them. But I still am struggling to connect the dots for how you would be in an administrative setting and still cultivate good relationship and like good formation, like practically speaking.
Yeah. Well, let me think of an example. So, students in your office because they did something wrong, right, in school. I think there's a necessary level of punitive. It needs to be punitive, right? There needs to be some sort of punishment, right? And consequence. But there's a very specific opportunity in that moment to also help them reflect and learn and grow, right? So you're not just like, hey, here's your detention, serve it. Sorry, be different. It's, you have a unique opportunity to, hey, this is what you did wrong, but here's why, right? And you instill that. You could say it's an opportunity to promote morality, right? Because, sometimes they don't understand, right? Even though we have very, very smart students, you have to walk them through it. And in that, you form that relationship too, and you can tie it back to, what we believe as Catholics, or, it's easy at Christ the King because you can go back to like, and this is something that both Jesuit and Christ the King do so well, is like instilling the mission of the school into the students. You look, every morning at Pavilion, we say, we are Christ the King, alive with Catholic faith, institution, spirit, nurturing respect, responsibility, and reason. Those are like the core values, right? Or at Jesuit, it's, you could fall back on like the men for others, or for the greater glory of God. But really, it's like, I think of it in the prayer for generosity. Teach me to be generous. Teach me to serve you as you deserve, to give and not to count the cost. So in those moments where I have a student in my office, it's like, you're not at a retreat in front of the Blessed Sacrament. You're not, in Europe, seeing St. Peter's Basilica, where like there's this big moment for you to cultivate their soul, but it's like there's a small moment where you're sitting there, and it's like, okay, you did something that wasn't the best decision. That's not the path you want to follow. But however, let's talk about how we can be better, and doing that through the lens of our Catholic faith.
Yeah. Because it would seem like in this Salesian model of like the building a relationship, it necessitates like a dedication to that mission, like a constancy. it's not as simple or as like one step as like you mission to the student and then they do this. But it takes like hundreds of little moments in order to cultivate that relationship.
100%. And
to
that's
get
why,
to that point you want to be at.
That's why like part of my job is just, and just an important part of the job is like being at the recesses, being on school trips, right? Not just to be the administrative presence, like, hey, Mr. Menendez is here. We don't want to, make sure you're not misbehaving, straighten up, whatever. But it's more so like those are the opportunities for me to meet the students. To, I literally
like crush the middle schoolers in basketball.
Literally, the students were playing soccer. I'll have to show you the video on my phone after this.
Please.
The students were playing soccer at recess, like 7th grade students, and I decided to join in the game and absolutely ate it. Right, like just tripped over the soccer ball, landed right on my radio. I had a bruise on my side for like a week.
That's embarrassing. That's
and it was so
you
embarrassing.
You have a video of this?
In those moments,
special.
of course I have a video. The first thing I did is to go inside, get ice on my butt, and then look at the cameras. I have access to the cameras now.
Assistant principal privileges.
And get the video, but it's just like even in those moments where like you're embarrassing, you're vulnerable, and you're human, and you're like you're not out there like the same with teaching. The worst teachers are the ones you couldn't relate to, right? Like forming those relationships where like they learn to trust and love you because you can be human with them and be interested in their lives, right? And I think that's the pudding right there, right? That's
build the
secret.
trust and be interested.
Yeah, they need to know that, they care. Like, for example, yesterday they asked me to go to and speak with the first grade Daisy Scouts. Okay, that's the Girl Scout troop for the first grade, and they I got to just go, and I had my assistant principal hat on, right? But like, it was outside of the school day, and I got to go and just like spend time with them and speak to them. And we spoke about authority figures, right? There was a formation there. That's why they asked me to go. But like, that was a time for me to like specifically spend time with those first graders and speak with them and hang out with them and talk to them. And, ask them about how they're doing too. Oftentimes it's that little moment that like a middle schooler might need that day, right? Hey man, why are you sitting alone over here? What's going on? Reading a book or something. Sometimes it's like, hey, I just want to be alone. I want to read my book because this book is really good. It's like, nice. Awesome. I love that. But then sometimes it's just like, you know what? I'm not feeling the best today. It's like, well, why? And then you follow up with that kid the next day and then the next day. And then what is that kid going to, like you were saying, 1,000 moments, right? Soon you're going to have a relationship where it's like, oh, I trust him.
Yeah, I trust Mr.
And
Menendez
I know that
now.
he cares for me.
I know he cares. Yeah.
So...
And you would say that's kind of the cornerstone of that Salesian model that you were talking about.
I think both Salesian and Ignatian.
Okay,
to be honest. But yeah, definitely Salesian. I mean, Salesian models like, joy, service, right? Having joy and being around and serving others is huge. I mean, St. John Bosco, one of the coolest things I ever learned about him was that he was a magician. Did you know that? He used to get young children, specifically the boys in the cities, to come listen to him speak. He actually tricked kids to come to church one time, I believe. I could be quoting that totally wrong, but like he would have a magic trick, right? And it would draw this crowd of boys, and then after the magic trick, he'd be like, "All right, let's talk about the gospel," like, and they're like, "Well, this guy's really cool. Like, that's awesome."
I do remember this actually.
Yeah.
I think I remember it was like he would memorize the homily word for word, and then he would go do a magic show, and then during it would like recite the homily back to the magic show.
Yeah.
That he memorized from the weekend.
Yeah, and stuff like that is it's really cool being at Christ the King now, learning the Salesian things, because I was just so much. I still think that I'm more Ignatian than Salesian, and just because I'm a product of it.
Have you learned magic tricks yet?
No, I need to. Imagine that a kid comes to my office.
Oh, man.
Why'd you punch Johnny at recess? Yeah. Wait,
if you pick the 3 of diamonds, detention.
If you pick the 3 of diamonds, you have to have detention. If you pick any other card, you're free to go. No, but I think that's been really cool learning that. And, we spoke about how, Nick Tannis has been on this podcast. He's like the epitome of the Salesian model. Like it's really cool learning that from him.
Okay.
And
then
Mr. Mitchell, Jimmy Mitchell's also very Salesian.
Yeah.
In that
Another
way.
great episode. If you haven't seen that one, go watch the Jimmy Mitchell episode.
Yeah.
It's sick.
After you watch this one.
After this. Yeah, don't click away from this video. Mom, if you're watching right now, don't click away.
Please.
So that's kind of what the Salesian model looks like in your education. What about the Jesuit model? I know there's obviously some bleed over. A saint is a saint. Like there's a lot of differences, but a relationship is not something that any saint would deny.
Yeah.
But what do you think are the nuanced differences between the two?
I think, in my experience, it makes sense that the Salesian model is used in like a K-8 school because I think that it's very catered to that. I think it's catered to high schools too. Obviously, there are Don Bosco high schools all around the world, but
Totally.
I think Jesuit and Jesuit education is definitely suited intellectually for older teenage boys and girls and beyond into college because it starts to focus on the whole person.
Yeah. What do you mean by a Jesuit education? We kind of touched on what the Salesian model looks like, but what does this Jesuit model look like?
Cultivating the entire person, right? Father Hermes used to always say, you've heard this before, Jesuit is not an 8 a.m. to 3:23 p.m. school, right?
Yeah.
When you go on campus, it's much more than just good classes, right? You have 50 odds or so student clubs. You have a fantastic athletic program. You have a next level campus ministry and peer ministry and retreat program. So that students can go out into the world well-rounded. What are the 5 tenets of like a Jesuit grad at grad? It's like religious, loving, open to growth.
Get a load of this guy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I have no idea.
But like that's what it does. It's like you're not just. I remember I had an opportunity when I was a sophomore to leave Jesuit and go to IMG Academy. To play lacrosse. They had started a lacrosse program, and like it was never an option. I was like, you want to come? No, because I would go to Jesuit without lacrosse because of the spiritual formation you get along with the educational formation, along with the student activities formation. There is something for everyone on campus, and all of it points to one thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is how do we become disciples and get to heaven, but how do we get ourselves to a point where we can get others to do the same thing, right?
So you'd say the Salesian model's cornerstone is relationship building, personal like touch points, and the Jesuit model has more of a focus on the care of the whole person and like full immersion in their formation.
Yeah,
is that a fair way to characterize it?
Yeah, and I'm not claiming to be an expert on.
No, this is your. I'm curious about your
my
perspective on this.
Yeah,
yes, totally.
Because there are definitely more nuanced things to both. Right, 100%.
Totally. Yeah, this is the Noah Menendez.
But from my perspective, yeah.
Yeah. So you'd say that this care of the person from Jesuit, like a lot of clubs, not a 750 to 823 thing. What does it actually look like in practice? Before this, we were talking about all the trips you've been on, all these retreats. You've done a lot of things that have to do with the care of the person at Jesuit. What does all that look like? What does that mean?
That looks like. Are you looking for like tangible examples, like
sure.
like tidbits, experiences? Yeah. That would be when I was teaching English, staying after school for an extra hour to offer essay help. That looks like being on campus until 8 or 8:30 because there's a game that you're coaching, right? That means taking on the burden of going on a trip for 2 weeks in Europe, right? Even though it sounds like really fun, like it is a perk and it's amazing, but it is draining.
It's a lot,
as you know, because you've been a student chaperone before.
It's
but
packed
like
2 weeks.
But it's it's not for the faint of heart, right? But I think that's, as an educator, that's what it looks like, right? The relentless pursuit of serving the students, right? And you see it in so many examples. on campus, and you see it in the students, the way they show it is they just want to know more and more about you, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just like you come in and like, hey, Mr. Menendez, I found your address. It's just like,
Why would you say that?
Why are you stalking me? But it's like, that's their way of showing like, hey, I care about you enough to look you up.
Yeah, even make a joke of it. Like I care about,
Yeah.
I think it's funny. Like it's any sort of, I feel like joking is a huge sign of like a well-cultivated relationship that you're allowed to get a lot more into in the high school setting than in
And you
K
see
through
that,
8.
I mean, you see that at Jesuit, like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there, you walk in and there is so much fun and funny going on. You
Totally.
know? I think that's, like you said, I think that's the sign of a good,
Is the care for the whole person.
of that. Yeah.
What are some of the fruits you've seen come from that?
In me personally, or just
You
in
personally
general?
and the students. I'm curious about
I
both.
think in me personally, like, even deeper faith. Like, I think, well, my return to Jesuit spurred the return of my desire to finish the sacraments, to go back to my spiritual journey. So when I was at Jesuit, I was really starting to blossom in my faith, you know, getting into peer ministry, pro-life club, Agmen Christi, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I never really finished sacraments. Like, I didn't get confirmed
Really?
or any of that. You know, I really just had like baptism and first communion and confession and stuff like that, you know. So when I came back, it was like, okay, I need to get confirmed. Then I got married, you know, like right in a row.
Yeah.
But when I look back at my time in Catholic schools, I've actually it's been more time, but I would say my faith has been even more affected as a teacher and assistant principal than it ever did when I was a student.
Mm-hmm.
I think
makes
that's the
sense.
most profound internal impact because, you know, you start to develop an even more mature understanding of faith, what it means in your life, and you face a lot more hardships as an adult. I mean, especially like being a dad now and, you know, being married and experiencing real life struggles. Like, what you experienced in high school might have been more light work, right?
Mm-hmm.
At least for me. I know a lot of people struggle with a lot of things in high school, and I'm not saying that.
I'm not
doesn't
trying to
happen.
minimize that.
Yeah,
but
not
in
minimize
your
that.
experience.
But
of it.
in my experience, you know, you experience a lot more hardships as an adult, and I've always leaned on my faith that I've learned through being a Catholic educator to help me with that as well. You know,
in general, it just sounds like you're a big fan of building relationships as a teacher.
yeah,
That like
I
that's
think-
kind of the cornerstone of the Noah Menendez special.
Yeah.
To kind of distill that down, we touched on some examples of it. But if a teacher came up to you and said, Noah, I hear what you're saying. I love what you have to say. How do I, an educator, do that? Practically speaking, what should I be doing in a broader sense to actually start cultivating these relationships in the classroom?
That's a great question. And I think in my role now, should be a question I should start answering more. You know, because I think that's also, you asked me an earlier question, like, what is it like to, you know, not have the direct influence on kids as a teacher that you do now as an administrator. And like part of that, and I'm learning it, I'm no master at it. I'm learning it is like that turns to teachers now because you know, I have to help form teachers who are now doing the forming of the kids. Right. And that's an even bigger responsibility. Right. But it's like, how do I form those relationships better so that I can be a better teacher? I think my first answer to that question is like, are you talking to the kids outside of their curriculum? You know, I think a sure way of forming a relationship with a student, they know that you care about them, is you asking them questions about themselves. And that's a tenet of any education. I mean, I did my master's in education not at a Catholic university. And, you know, that's a big thing they always stressed in curriculum building is like, is your curriculum designed to approach every student and where they're at? You know, so you should be doing that. But I think specifically in education and Catholic education, it's, you know, are you showing an interest in the child? You know, are you just there to collect a paycheck and peace out? Or are you there to, which I mean, some people are.
Yeah, you give your
not
quiz,
as
you
much
grade
in
it, you
Catholic
bounce.
Education, but that's why there's such a crisis in teaching because, you know, there are several reasons, but, you know, there are a lot of people who are just doing that, you know, and, you know, it's like, are you are you asking questions like, hey, how was your game last night? You know, how's your family doing? You know, what are your interests?
Mm-hmm.
You know, do you play an instrument? And then the best teachers, and I've had several teachers like this. One of them was not a Jesuit. He was one of my favorite teachers of all time. It was from middle school. His name was Mr. Burrows. If I put this on Facebook, you'll hear it.
Perfect.
Mr. Burrows, I love you.
Shout out to Mr. Burrows.
Showing up outside of their normal hours to be there for the kids, right? I think Mr. Burrows showed up to one of my college lacrosse games.
Wow.
Like 12 years after I had him in middle school.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make sense. 10 years after I had him.
I mean, but I'll come back at you though. It's like, all right, I'm an educator. I don't have time for that. I have a family. I have a wife. I have a kid.
Yeah, it's true.
Like how do I what are you saying? Like, what are you talking about? Go to their games outside of school? Like,
Yep.
I don't have time.
Yeah, and I think that's a legit point. I mean, and I'm experiencing that now at more than ever now, being a dad, and not just being married, but being a dad. And, you know, one answer could be like, well, you can make time once a semester, right? But another answer could be like, well, how can you do it during the school day? You know, it's like when I was a Jesuit, we had a study hall in the middle of the day during lunch period every day. And, you know, it's like, are you showing up to that study hall and like just interacting with students and being there? Like, that's a way. Or before school, are you leading a club before school? You know, there are other opportunities except for outside of school to do that. Yeah. And I think you'll see that, unfortunately, but fortunately, it's like a double-edged sword. There are many teachers who sacrifice family time and sacrifice personal time to be with students, and those are the best teachers and administrators.
Making a sacrifice. So step one is just talk to the students outside of class, not about curriculum. Show up to their games, show up to support them, show them that you actually care about them. What's next? Cool, I did that.
Then what? Did that. Well, I mean, and then after that, I think things will naturally grow from there. I mean, I look at our relationship. The first time I met John Barreto was on a pro-life trip, his sophomore or junior year. And I just recently told the story, so he knows where this is going. And we started talking, we connected over music. And we were on the Metro. And then you actually also had the entire Summa on your person.
Was that how I was getting down? That's nasty work. I don't know why I would ever do that. That's something I would make fun of someone else for doing.
Oh, now. You had it. That was your thing that year.
I really should have made
See that?
fun
I know about you. See that?
Care
for you. And we formed a bond over hating carpets on altars. And every church we went to on that trip, it was like, do you see that? That's,
like carpet in the sanctuary. Yeah.
Carpet in the
I hate carpeted flooring in churches.
What's the deal with that?
All love to anyone who works at a school that might have carpet in your church. It's not a personal thing. I don't hate the priests that work there. I don't hate the educators. The church itself with carpet in it got a lot of beef. I could do another 45 minutes on just that.
Yeah.
But I do remember this Metro ride. We got into it about carpet on churches.
Yeah, and like from that point on after that was step one, right? That just, because we had the relationship, like, even though I didn't teach you, as you became a junior and a senior, other times I would see you on campus, we had a connection. And that would lead into another conversation, or that would lead into, hey, Mr. Menendez, I'm not saying this is you. I'm thinking about going to USF. What do you think about that? You know, like it makes it possible, and it opens up the pipeline for further relationships. It's like, hey, now I'm comfortable with Mr. Menendez. I do want to go to his essay help after school. Or like, I'm having trouble in this situation in my life. Can you help me out with that? Can you guide me on that?
It kind of seems to me like it's basically like step one is just make yourself available, talk to your students. But step two is like to have kind of a lean in posture. I like to think about things in like a posture sense, is like, if you're telling me things that you care about on a personal level, and I'm just kind of sitting here like this, like leaned back, versus like I'm here. Like I'm ready to listen to you. I want to know more. And the next time I see you, I'm leaned in. It like enhances that in the future.
Podcast posture.
Yeah.
No, it's 100%. I think that's a big part of it, right? And I think you get a lot of that on those campuses. I mean, there's a reason why, at Christ the King, we just had our alumni day, like where the alumni came back, and there was like, it felt like 200 kids. Or like you'll be a Jesuit and somebody's in their junior year of college and it's Thanksgiving break and they just pop on campus. It's people don't do that at other schools.
Yeah,
they don't desire to get out of an exam and go to Christ the King to see Father Len and their old teachers and eat some Chick-fil-A. They don't do that at other places, and I think there's a reason for that. They're called back to that because of those things.
It's all built on relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun. The fact that 45 minutes has already blown by is insane to me. But thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this was great.
It's been great.
I'm going to start my own podcast now.
Great, competing
and
podcast.
I'll have you on.
Nets even deeper in the water.
Nets even deeper in the water. You've seen John Barreto's show.
1 degree better. Everyone, thank you so much for watching.
Yeah.
Mom, thanks for watching. Anyone else happens to be watching, thank you. To end the podcast, we always clap at the same time. We are out.